Efficient breaststroke technique requires powerful pull, fast arms recovery, and strong kick. Many young swimmers have more pronounced technical errors than older swimmers. Age group swimmers are losing speed the most in these phases of breaststroke. Moving arms forward too slow or too deep, gliding with head high and legs low, late kick and wide kick, opening arms too wide at the beginning of the stroke.
So now we're talking about breaststroke, and one of the issues is when to initiate the pull out front. And I'm going to look at it from a little bit different way as far as separating the hands out front. I think that, you know, in talking to some great breaststrokers and then doing some experimentation on my own, the feeling of sliding the hands out to the side to make sure that you're not making a connection is as much to do with making sure that you're not pushing the water laterally or outward as it does to do with momentum are you carrying at that point in order to then slide the hands effectively to the catch position at the corners. And so a lot of that comes in with the timing between the extension or the recovery of the hands and the kick. And so that's how I'm going to look at this this particular one. So when we look at swimmers and we're doing evaluations, one of the things that we try to make sure is that the way that I like to say it is that the hands are ready, or the front of the body is ready to accept the propulsion that the kick is about to give. In my eyes, that means that the momentum or the speed that the swimmer is going into extension and then can effectively slide the hands to the corners has got to be higher. So if we've come to a stop or a hesitation because the recovery and the kick have crossed over each other, then the acceleration or the momentum going into that is going to be less, which means the athlete is going to then try to regain their speed through power, which is power at the wrong place at the wrong time, which is pushing the hands out at the front. So the start of the stroke has to do as much with the momentum that the athlete is carrying into the stroke. So that's how I'm going to go about this. So we look at this particular athlete right now. And the position that we always look for is, where does the initiation of the kick come in? Where do the feet engage to start driving the swimmer forward? So we look at the recovery of the feet, and then right here, the feet are starting to go back. So the kick has effectively started at that point. And then we look up here and say, what position is the front of the body in, and are they ready to accept the propulsion the kick is about to deliver? The answer is no. So what we have here is a cancellation of the effectiveness of the kick and the effectiveness of the extension. So this poor guy is trying so hard, and as the hands are extending, the feet are going back, and it's just he's extending in the water, but it's not happened in a sequenced process that is allowing him to really move forward, which means that as he separates his hands, there's really nothing there. So he's got to then try to regain that momentum at that point, which is not easy to do. So let's look at the next swimmer. So, and again, we're going to get into this, the size of the kick, the size of the recovery, the direction forward, and all of that, because that's how you make the adjustments to hopefully get the swimmer to the point where they are effectively getting through the transition between the recovery of the arms and legs, and then effectively flowing forward. You like how I said that, flowing. That's how I feel about breaststroke. It's a flow. So again, we look back here at the feet, and we see where the feet are engaging, so right there. And actually, she's doing a great job. Look at how close she is. Look at the hands, and think of the time that it took her to get to streamline, one hand locked on top of the other. So this was really nice from a young swimmer really thinking about it, but obviously the head is in the way. So she's kicking herself into a position that is not as productive as it can be. So right there, we're going to clean up that line. But I think overall, yeah, she did a really nice job, especially when you think you can watch her swim. She's not been swimming a long time, but some of the things that she's been taught are tremendous. But obviously, it's in a sequence of things. So again, looking at where the feet engage, looking forward, the arms are extended, the head is just up. So it's not bad. So nice job for her. Now we get to a better swimmer here. And so this swimmer does a pretty good job. Now look at this. So where do the feet engage? Right there, the feet are started. Look at that. That is fantastic. So this is kind of what you're looking for, is the idea that the swimmer is in a position that they're driving like a needle or a spear forward as the kick engages. So it's really nice. Now, about the only thing here is that the hands start down a little bit. So she's sinking. This is the other thing you have to take into consideration, which we'll talk about in a minute, is that if the hands are going down at all, when the body's in this position, it's going to fall. So it's going to come down. After the breath, the body's going to come down. If the hands go down at all, as she is right here, as the body's falling, it's probably going to end up a little bit deeper. Plus, she's tucking her head probably a little bit too much. So now she gets into a little bit of a downward position. But overall, really, really good job on that one. And I think we've got one more right there. So we look at the feet again and where they're engaging. Look up front. She is so close. She is so close. Look at the arms. So if the arms were actually forward, she's got it. So this is something that we saw a lot of on our trip, was a lot of lack of extension, not locking the arms out in front. There were relaxed arms out in front. And so here, she's doing such a good job, but then the recovery is not where it should be. But again, if we look at the timing, again, I always have to be careful as a teacher. If I'm saying one thing, that I'm focusing only on that thing. I'm not focusing on other things she's doing wrong. So I would praise this athlete for her timing rather than telling her the little things that I think she's doing wrong. So nicely done there. And then you can clean up the other things later. So again, I think that this has to do with the momentum that you carry into the opening of the hands or into the engagement of the hands and initiating the pull sequence. So thank you.
Let's look at arms recovery in breaststroke for age group swimmers. Two typical mistakes in breaststroke for younger swimmers are slow and deep arms recovery. In many cases, these two mistakes are happening at the same time. As a result, swimmers are losing speed more significantly. Moving arms forward underwater creates more frontal drag than moving arms forward on the surface. Arms and shoulders are pushing water forward once they are under the surface. That's why most of elite level swimmers recover their arms right on the surface. Slow arms recovery is also a mistake. When swimmers moving arms forward, it is non-propulsive phase. The slower arms are moving forward, the longer time swim speed drops down. Elite level swimmers shooting arms forward at the extremely fast pace. That's why they are not losing as much speed in non-propulsive phase as age group swimmers. When deep recovery and slow recovery are matching together, swimming speed drops more and for a longer time. This is one of the biggest mistakes for younger swimmers. All mistakes can be fixed doing certain drills, or even better, to learn correct swimming technique from the beginning. Let's watch breaststroke swim power videos for age group swimmers. As you can see here on the screen, swimmer is swimming breaststroke, and on the bottom is the velocity curve. Green line is synchronized with the video. Right now, when swimmer moving arms forward, speed drops to 0.5, 0.6 meters per second, sometimes even lower. For example, right here, you see speed drops to 0.43 meters per second. So you see arms are moving forward underwater, really going deep. Swimmer dives deep underwater. Head is open in this position. Obviously, hands are open as well. But the biggest mistake probably is that arms are going too deep underwater and probably a little bit too slow. It's very hard to move arms forward underwater really fast. It's easier to move arms forward fast on the surface because it doesn't create as much drag as underwater. So let's look another swimmer who swims breaststroke. Okay, so pulling, it's a pretty decent pull, although there are definitely rooms to improve. We'll discuss about the pull a little bit later. But let's watch what happens when arms are recovering. See, arms are recovering forward after reaching the pull peak. Swimmer drops speed to almost 0 meters per second, 0.14 meters per second. That's pretty slow, obviously. And another thing is that the gap between pull and kick peak, which happens right here, this is when it reaches the peak, so is too big as well. The smaller gap between pull, which is 116 meters per second, and kick, which is 131 meters per second over here for this particular swimmer, the smaller the gap, the faster swimmer is going to swim. How to make gap smaller? You need to recover arms on the surface and at the extremely fast pace, shooting arms forward. So let's watch some other swimmers, how they swim. So this is a young swimmer. As you see, her pull is not very strong. She relies primarily on the kick, which is 126 meters per second at this phase. Obviously, arms too deep. She's watching forward. There are some other mistakes that we are not discussing right now. Pull is not very strong as well. Kick is much stronger than pull. She's speed on the pull is only 0.9, sometimes 1 meters per second. But again, the biggest mistake in this case that we are discussing is arms recovery. Very slow, very deep in the water, and that doesn't allow the swimmer to swim faster. Okay, let's look maybe one more swimmer. Age group swimmer recovery. Again, pulling, not as strong as the kick. The kick is stronger. And then arms recovery, speed drops to the 0. This is again too long. And if you look, the gap between pull and kick peaks is huge. Elite level swimmers probably have 1/3 only of this gap. And based on our research, elite level swimmers going so quickly, the velocity curves are different than for age group swimmers. And arms recovery, in my opinion, it has to be a priority for every younger swimmers. That's why coaches need to pay attention to that, how to develop quick arms recovery on the surface and minimize time at slow speed.
Okay, next we're going to talk about the recovery of breaststroke. And I like to consider this one of the fastest motions in all of swimming. You want to make sure that anything that's moving forward in the front of the stroke has got to get done very, very quickly. So the speed of the recovery, the direction of the recovery is impacted by so many different things. One is how far back a swimmer is pulling, how high is their body when they have their in sweep, when they're going up to air, and then obviously the rules, making sure that the elbows are in engagement with the water. So we're going to look at some pretty standard things here, things that are very easy to see. So the first swimmer here is a little bit older swimmer, maybe not a breaststroker, but doesn't really think much about the recovery as far as the focus on it, because he's a strong kid, but there's a slow recovery deep. And so when you analyze and you think about how you're doing things in the water, anytime you're pushing that much of your arm through the water, you're going to create resistance. And in creating resistance, we can now start to analyze a little bit more what is happening to the body. And again, we take into consideration the timing that we talked about on the last segment, that if the timing isn't correct, and if you're creating too much resistance, either through too low of a recovery, too far back of a recovery, or too big of a kick. So all these factors, if we just watch the hips, and now you've got, I love filming in pools like this because you have the lane line, which basically acts as a grid in the background. And if we watch the hips during all of this that's going on, you see at this point, the swimmer is at a complete dead stop. So by creating the recovery, the resistance to the recovery at the exact same time that the legs are recovering, you don't have much of a chance at that point. And so now he has to completely reaccelerate from the kick, which means that what we talked about in the last segment, that front end better be clean. Because if you're trying to go from a stop into some motion, that you've got to be clean. And we can see right there that the arms are too far down because he recovered them low and slow. So the body fell, and so there is an issue at that point. So that's one of the things to think about. This tells the story of itself, the direction of the recovery. We're looking at the shortest line between two segments or 2 points is directly forward. So this is what we try to work on with athletes, is making sure that the hands are going directly forward, not up and over, not under, but almost directly right on the surface of the water. Because when the athlete is up in this position, like we talked about, the athlete is going to fall, and hopefully the fall of the torso, the head, the shoulders, everything will bring those arms down to the depth of the rest of the body. They're not to be led there by themselves. So this swimmer takes the arms down and then falls, and the arms are still down. Now we have to recover from that and get back up, because this swimmer is now too deep to, you hope that he's swimming a 200 breaststroke at this point and has a tremendous kick, because rate is going to be something that's going to be very, very difficult to get. So making sure that the swimmer is going forward and not down. I mean, you can just see the line that there is on this body, that it makes it very difficult to really go down the pool as fast as he would want to. A younger swimmer, same sort of thing. The big thing here is that you can see how deep the elbows are getting. So this is instinctual as well. This is one of those things that little kids love to pull. They don't love to extend. They like to swim behind them if they could. They just want to push themselves forward. So the elbows get so far back, and the body is not in a position to come up, so that the arms are completely underwater, and he's pushing everything through the water all at the same time. So there's a little bit better one right there. This is where you teach little kids that less is more, just little poles out in front, keeping them in that long line that we're eventually going to want to see them in. So I personally always teach line first and then start to build around it. You're going to look at another one here, another older swimmer that is just aiming too far down. And so when swimmers have the strength to really shoot forward, we have to focus on getting them to really think about that direction forward straight there, because again, his body is falling, and look at where his body fell to. Now imagine that this stroke with the arms going straight forward rather than down. So let's look at the timing of it. The feet are engaging right there, because this is what we talked about. So he is so close, but imagine the arms are here rather than there. That kick and the payoff from the kick, because of the recovery being in line and fast, is going to be so much better. So he's very, very close. And I think there's one more, which I absolutely love. This is a young swimmer. You're going to see things that aren't perfect. His body line isn't perfect. Maybe his kick's too big, but what he does that's so cool, I just love it. And I love to see young swimmers like this. So right here, again, not a horrible position. Maybe the elbow's a little too far back. We'll look at the line from the torso to the thighs to the feet. Looks really nice at that point. Look at that extension. Boom. Right on the surface. He doesn't have the mass to come up and be big enough to fall down yet. But the skill that he's already learned, in that, the arms have got to get out there so quickly. It's right when the feet start to engage right there. Look at him. He's still sinking a little bit, but watch this again. I've loved seeing this. Oh no, and then that one wasn't as good. That's what always happens. Boom, right there. And that you just see him hit the front. Boom, boom. I love that there's that much focus on it. The other stuff can take care of itself. One of the things that's very difficult to teach someone is the attack out front. And to the point that when they get bigger, they're throwing themselves in the momentum forward. So to have this at that young of an age, I think is tremendous. So that was a really cool one. Thanks.
Let's look at another typical breaststroke technique mistake: gliding with high head position, and as consequence, low body and legs. When head position is high during the gliding phase, swimmers create more frontal drag for at least two reasons. First, body, hips, legs are low in the water. Second, watching forward and high head position moves more water forward than extended neck position and watching face down. Bent neck makes the head softer and less stable as well. That's why swimmers should completely extend neck and watch down during the gliding phase. When swimming shorter distances, such as 50 and 100, gliding phase is shorter. However, it is longer for 200 event. That's why it's even more important to have good gliding position swimming longer distance. It is also important to keep hands connected and arms fully extended during the gliding phase, like underwater butterfly kicking position. If swimmers are keeping hands apart, it creates more frontal drag. Legs should be connected during the gliding phase as well. Separated feet drag more water and swimmers are losing speed faster. All this and other mistakes can be fixed doing certain drills, or even better, to learn correct swimming technique from the beginning. Let's watch breaststroke swim power videos for age group swimmers. So this swimmer, as you see, is swimming, and when he's gliding, his legs are deeper than the body, especially at the beginning of the stroke. So if you stop video right here, you see how low are feet in the water. And one of that is that he starts lifting the head up. See right here, head is watching forward. So then hips and legs are going deep in the water. So all that is not horizontal position, obviously dragging much more water, instead being completely horizontal on the surface. And that's why even at the beginning of the stroke, you see speed doesn't increase, because swimmer has to overcome more drag being in this position. There are a few other mistakes that he's doing. However, let's talk about the gliding right now. So, and he again glides over, kicks over here, glides, and you see the more he's pulling, the deeper legs going in the water. Maybe lack of flexibility as well, because if you're moving, upper body above the surface, your leg should be still closer to the surface before you start bending the knees. And all this stuff affects swimming speed. Let's look some another swimmer who swims as well with very low legs position in the water. You see speed with the arms reaching 1.2 meters per second. There is also late kick, as we already discussed. Then she's gliding over here. See, kicking slightly stronger than pull. She reaches about 1.3 meters per second on the kick. But during the gliding phase, as you see here, legs are again very low in the water. And that's typical for swimmers when legs are too deep in the water, and swimmers cannot generate good power. And so you see again, legs, distance between legs and the surface is probably about more than 1 foot, 1.5 foot or so. So, and that's obviously creates more drag than keeping legs and hips as high as possible on the surface. So speed would be higher than 131 meters per second as she has right now. Kicking is probably a similar peak, however, it's wider. As you see, that's why normally kick is stronger as well. And then she's gliding over here, good head position at the beginning, but she lifts the head early, going to the surface, maybe because of too deep gliding position as well, and legs stay low in the water. So all these are basic mistakes, typical mistakes for age group swimmers.
So now we're going to talk about everybody's favorite subject, which is the size of the breaststroke kick. Obviously, over time, we've seen the size of the breaststroke kick getting smaller, quicker, and it really is about the disruption that the setup of the breaststroke kick causes. So the 4 videos that I'm going to show you all will have a very similar issue, even though the kicks are of different sizes. It's one of those things that people will think, well, this doesn't happen to my kids, until you really film and really start to look at what the flow is. And again, with these athletes having the lane line right behind them, it becomes very easy to illustrate what happens. And my philosophy is that if you are creating so much resistance that your body comes to a stop, you got to stop doing that. The payback is so difficult. And so to find that flow that is the perfect balance between how much propulsion you're developing and then how much resistance you're creating, you have to think about the efficiency factor as well. And so everything comes into play in this. And I think sometimes we just don't think about the hiding of the body or the limiting resistance as being the first line of defense of efficiency. So when we look at these athletes, this is a pretty good swimmer right here. Maybe the head's a little bit out, but the hands have already started to separate. So she's into her catch. So nicely done. Kick is pretty good. We look at the body line. So it's not like she's crunching up a ton on her kick. If we really get into this, we'd also film these from straight down, and we see how wide it is. Where are the heels exposed? How wide are they in comparison to the knees and the hips? So where is resistance being created? What I wanted to get across right here is if we watch her hips in relation to the lane line behind her, we'll notice that as she recovers, we've got this going on. And again, this all plays into it. It's not one thing or another, it's everything. But you can see that her hips have come to a stop. So she, in essence, is stopped right now. If we were to do this in the endless pool, in the backyard, basically what I would see is this push-pull, 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 because when the resistance is so great, the swimmer actually moves back in the pool. And then what we can do is we can work on the timing, the size of the kick, the size of the recovery, or the speed of the recovery, all these different factors to finally get them fairly smooth. And then we start working on more propulsion. So this is the best one. So she actually did a really good job. As we start to look at some of these others, you'll get an idea of what we're talking about. So this swimmer is so focused on the back end that he does a very common thing for young swimmers, which is to set the hips. So rather than just drawing the hips, he sets them, and you can see this line that he creates right there, which is going to create resistance in the lower back. And now he's trying to pull the hips forward in order to set up that kick. So right there, looks great. Really cool. I wish the setup wasn't there because this part looks really nice. The way that it's drawn and the legs are kind of buckling behind. I love that. Really good. But look at how much he wants out of that kick. He wants to drive himself forward. And I get there's no better feeling in the world than the acceleration that comes after a great kick and into the beautiful line out front. It feels great. The problem is that if you're really accelerating, that means you stopped, you slowed down. So sometimes you don't feel that. There's just this forward constant motion where you're just moving forward, and it's not this start stop. So let's look at his hips against the lane line again. So right here, he is actually moving backwards. So, you feel for these athletes because this comes from a good place. They're trying so hard. They want to do the best possible. They're doing it for all the right reasons. It's just that they're trying so hard, they get in their own way. And it's our job as coaches and teachers to say, okay, look, what I'm going to tell you is not going to feel productive. Because you've built these feelings into yourself already that you want to feel that acceleration. You want to feel that power from the kick. And so that's what feels good. And when I tell you the things I'm going to tell you, you're not going to feel that anymore, and you're going to fight me on it. This is why it's so important to show them through video, through what Dr. G's doing, through analysis, through an endless pool, whatever. You got to show them that it's not just how you feel, it's how you flow. It's how all this stuff moves together. So again, I love to see those athletes, but I feel for them at the same time. So here again, let's look at the line between the torso and the thighs, and then we can tell that the feet may be a little bit too far outside on this one as well. So we'll look at the hips in relation to the lane line again. And again, there's that slight backwards motion right there. So again, an athlete that's really trying hard to set up the kick, but it all, as we've talked about, it all ties together with, are the arms set? Is the body ready to accept that kick. And, you know, if you limit how far back the arms go on the recovery, then they have less distance to travel forward. She can get back to that line sooner. And then if we limit how high the legs come up, we create less resistance. And so, you know, from a visual standpoint, you look at it and you go, gosh, this makes so much sense. But then when you get in the pool, all you see as an athlete is power and force. And so you fight all of these, the reality of the situation, that the harder you try, the slower you're going to go. We're going to look at one more here. Again, that's nice. She just tightened up the feet. Maybe she's not done with her kick. Let's look. Feet are dragging a little bit, but overall, not bad. So let's look at a good swimmer. Setting up. So right there it is again. This is probably too big of a kick, obviously, really crunched up all the way through. But the athlete is coming from a good place. They're trying as hard as they can. And this is where we come in, and we have to teach them what will make them the most productive, not what feels the best. Thanks.
Now we are going to review breaststroke kicking technique mistakes such as late kick and wide kick. Both mistakes are more pronounced for age group swimmers, although there are a few elite level swimmers who are doing similar mistakes but on a smaller scale. Late kick begins with late bending knees as preparation for the kick. In order not to delay the kick, swimmers should begin bending knees when squeezing elbows during the stroke. If swimmers begin bending knees for the kick after squeezing elbows, kick will be late and swimmers will lose more speed at that phase. The best timing to initiate the kick is when arms are fully extended before head completely enters in the water. Another kicking mistake is wide kick, which is typical for younger swimmers. There are three problems with wide kick. First, swimmers are moving more water to open knees, preparing for the wide kick. Second, wide kick isn't as strong as narrower kick. Third problem with wide kick happens after the kick, when legs and feet are separated too much, and it takes longer time to bring them together for the gliding phase. All mistakes can be fixed during certain drills, or even better, to learn correct swimming technique from the beginning. Let's watch breaststroke swim power videos for age group swimmers. So this is the first swimmer we are watching. Okay, there are definitely several mistakes, but let's focus on the kick only. So as you see right here, kick happens, starts initiating the kick swimmer when head is already fully in the water. That's normally a mistake, and that's why the peak between pull and kick, as you see here from on the swim power videos, so this gap is too big. Okay, so and if you again look how much speed swimmers are losing, so first gaining the speed more than 1 meter per second on the pull phase. So then in this phase, head already enters in the water, but legs are not ready for the kick. And that's why kick delays. Speed already close to the zero, and swimmer stays longer time at the zero speed until he initiates the kick. Okay, so let's see when he starts bending the knees. His finishing stroke, still knees are not bent, and only when swimmer right here moving already at the end of the squeezing elbows, he starts bending the knees. That's slightly delay. It's just fraction of the second, maybe 2/10 of the second, but that's enough to initiate late kick. As you see, kick happens always later at that phase. Okay, and probably knees also slightly too wide, although not as bad for this swimmer. We'll see other examples. So let's go to the next swimmer. Okay, how she is swimming. So again, don't worry about stroke technique right now. We'll discuss that a little bit later. So let's look at kicking technique. You see, right before the kick, let's go maybe a little bit back so we can see better. right here before the technique, she opens knees too much. And even during the kick, feet are going wider. So what happens, she's pushing more water to the sides, not as much water back. Also by moving knees, opening knees more at this phase, she's moving more water. And that's a mistake because then you are losing timing and you're creating more drag by moving the water. Also, wide knees as this are not a strong position as to keep knees narrower to generate power. And then definitely after the kick, it takes longer times to bring feet together. And she creates drag with open feet, with feet apart outside the body line for a longer time as well. So there are, as you see, several mistakes. Arms extended, she's kicking too late and too wide at the same time. Obviously, that affects your overall speed because slow speed here between pull and kick peaks, she's keeping this slow speed for long time. It would be much better to start kicking earlier in the stroke. Okay, let's watch maybe one or two more swimmers, how they kick. So very late kick. You see, swimmer starts bending knees, slightly too late, head enters in the water, and then kick starts. Again, really big gap between pull and kick. And elite level swimmers, as already mentioned, they have much smaller gap, twice smaller, sometimes even 3 times smaller gap between pull and kick than age group swimmers. All right, next swimmer, really wide knees position. Look how wide knees position are here. Head is already in the water, arms are not extended. Very slow arms moving forward, and kick also too wide legs position. So all this stuff definitely affects swimming speed.
And the last point on breaststroke, which is going to make me sad because now we're not going to talk about breaststroke anymore, is the line and getting back to the line and the importance of getting back to the line. There's a start, there's a stop to every stroke. There's a beginning and an end. And that is that line, that really rigid body line that's out front that the swimmer is just getting, riding for a little bit. And obviously, depending on, if you're Adam Peaty or if you're a 12-year-old, where that line is and, how long you spend in it, what the race is and, what the depth is. But the important thing in developing swimmers, in my opinion, is that we have to focus on making sure they understand the line. And the swimmers I'm going to show you right now, I'm going to prove that they know the line, maybe not all of them, which we're going to see, but we're going to show that they know the line. They just forget it when they're swimming. They focus on swimming rather than the line, and so they end up creating more resistance than they need to. So the way that we know that swimmers understand the line is how they push off the wall. So most swimmers are streamlining with the eyes down, looking at the bottom, and so they leave the wall like that every time. And then when they swim breaststroke, it's not that they need to be in the streamlined position, but the head needs to be as if it was in the streamlined position. So we'll get this swimmer up to the line, which you've already seen that she knows where the streamline is. And one of the things that's easy to see when you're filming directly from the side is the goggles under the arms. So if you see the goggles show up under the arms, they're really close to hitting it, or they've hit their line perfectly. So if you don't see them, then the head is up probably a little too high. So making sure that they finish that job and get the head down to where they're going to see, we're going to see their goggles from the side, or in the endless pool, they look themselves directly in the eye. So they're looking directly down at them. And that's not as easy as you think. As an old breaststroker, it's hard for me to get my head down that way because it's not natural for me. But it makes a huge difference when I reach extension and look down and see my face. So it's a big deal. So let's look at this next swimmer. She knows the line. Look at that. Look at that. Look at the toes pointed. And this is another thing about the line is that people think that it's just the front. It's not just the front. It's everything. It's making sure that you're pointing the toes, that you're creating no resistance at all with the feet dragging in the back, creating vortices and turbulence. It's almost like the water's grabbing on your back rather than letting you just slice through it. So it's not just this the relaxed position. It is rigid. You want to be like a torpedo, piercing through the water, or a spear. So that right there, stunning, just beautiful. Now let's look at her swim. Feet are relaxed, head is up. So that beautiful position that she left the wall with, her instinctual nature of speed, of maintaining velocity, which is the streamline push-off, leaves her in between each stroke on breaststroke. And if we could teach her how important that is, and she's taken 8-10 strokes a length, think about how much more efficient that's going to be, whether it's to save efficiency or save energy, or whether it's to maintain or gain speed. It's not as clean as it can be. And that's what we look for, is cleanliness in the line. We're going to go here to this little guy. Does this little guy know the line? Look at that. I mean, that is stunning. Look at the feet. Sure, he's a little bit out of sorts right there, but that's what happens to little kids. The proportions of their bodies are not absolutely perfect. And so sometimes there's some imperfections up top because they got that big head that they're fitting in that little body. So that right there, I love it. I think it's tremendous. But then let's get here when he starts to swim. I don't even have to say anything. So this is the sort of thing that, he's looking to take another stroke. He's not looking to complete a stroke. He's not looking to end a stroke and then start another one from that spot. This is what happens, and this is so common, that he just wants to swim. He wants to go from one stroke to the next stroke to the next stroke. And it's very common, and I love him for it, but we can do better. We can teach them better lines and how to finish things. And then our last swimmer, so I figured they'd all have good push-offs, so I brought him back. So this is someone that's obviously new. That's so easy to fix. So that's, she's just a new swimmer who wanted to get filmed, which is cool. Her legs are nice and straight. Her toes can be pointed a little bit better. There's no streamline, and obviously the head is up. So when you don't know the line and you start to swim breaststroke, what do we think is going to happen here? So let's get her up here. The exact same thing that we thought was going to happen on the push-off. So the first thing this swimmer needs to learn is, what is a streamline? What is toe point? What is a rigid body line? What is it supposed to feel like to go fast in the water? What is it like to push off and just glide with that, that rigid body line? So once she learns that, we have an association to then take her forward into breaststroke and into, instead of this. So not everybody knows it yet, and we can't just assume that they do. We have to teach them the beginning, and then the middle, which is the line, in my opinion, is the middle of breaststroke. It's the start and the beginning and the end of each stroke. So important. I spend more time teaching people the line than I do pull and kick, because that's what most people miss. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed breaststroke. I love talking about it, so hit me up in the room. And if I said something you don't agree with, cool, teach me something. Thank you.
The next typical mistake in breaststroke technique for age group swimmers is opening arms too much at the beginning of the stroke. Many young swimmers are taught to open arms first, then squeeze elbows strongly to generate power. Based on our research, it is a mistake. Opening arms too wide with palms pointed to the sides doesn't move swimmers forward as much. In fact, it creates more frontal drag because of a big triangle between open arms and shoulders. The triangle moves too much water forward, and swimmers are swimming slower. Most of elite level swimmers have a narrower pool, especially sprinters over 50 and 100. Narrow pool has more advantage since swimmers can generate higher speed from the beginning of the stroke. Swimmers can move themselves forward more if they would point fingertips down and palms towards the feet from the beginning of the stroke. This position would create more propulsion instead of just opening the arms. All mistakes can be fixed doing certain drills, or even better, to learn correct swimming technique from the beginning. Let's watch breaststroke swim power videos for age group swimmers. Okay, so you see the swimmer. There are again multiple mistakes, but one of the mistakes, let's focus now opening the arms. Again, on the bottom, you see the velocity curve, green line in the middle is synchronized with the video. So swimmer starts pulling right now. The palms are pointed to the sides, okay? And he is opening arms. Does it create propulsion? Doesn't look like. Speed still pretty flat over here at this phase at 0.82 meters per second. Okay, even right here, he is opening more arms, still palms pointed to the sides. Speed 0.87 meters per second over here. So swimmer is not accelerating, as you can see at this phase. Wouldn't be smarter to rotate palms towards the feet earlier, or even start right away opening arms with palms pointed towards the feet? Then you start pulling yourself forward. But when just opening arms, palms towards to the sides, doesn't look like it creates good propulsion. Okay, and once swimmer turns palms towards the feet, look what's happening. Speed starts to increase. Right now, it's 1.16 meters per second. So in my opinion, fingertips down and palms towards the feet should be pointed earlier in the stroke. In fact, that's supported by our research as well, as you can see here. So then swimmer finishes the stroke, reaching the peak about 1.4 meters per second. Movie comes forward. Obviously, it's too deep, as we already discussed, but let's focus just on the pull. And again, starts the pulling, palms pointed to the sides. So it's not the best position to generate good power. As you can see, it's supported by the data, which shows 0.87 meters per second speed at that phase. Okay, let's look some other swimmers, how they swim. Breaststroke technique, as I told, is very typical mistake. So you see how far swimmer is opening arms. Speed, again, doesn't increase at this phase, 102 meters per second. Fingertips are pointed to the sides. Maybe easiest way to develop better technique to tell swimmers, don't point fingertips to the sides and palms to the sides, just point fingertips down and palms will be pointed towards the feet from the beginning of the stroke. They still can open arms, but they will be already pushing a little bit water towards the feet and start accelerating earlier in the stroke. Again, she can see swimming, opening arms. Whenever fingertips are pointed down, like in this position, she's changing the direction, speed starts to increase. So again, clear indication that palms pointed towards the feet, that's where power comes from. Palms pointed to the sides, the power doesn't increase. That's why we should teach probably swimmers different technique in order for them to learn more faster stroke technique. So let's look at the next swimmer. Opening arms. Again, even pointing fingertips down still doesn't accelerate, probably not a strong physically swimmer, although tall boy. But again, opening arms too much at the beginning of the stroke. Right here, palms pointed to the sides, as you can see, and speed doesn't increase over here. And then again, starts the stroke.
Right, excellent. And we're back. I gotta get the community thing up. Yeah, so we've got a few questions in the session Q&A. I see you guys have been answering some in the chat also.